So it's great to be here. I've heard about Waterloo for years, even when I was going to university. I never came here. My family comes from around here, despite the fact that I'm living in Manitoba at the moment. Just going to turn this on. Does this help? Okay, good. So this, by the way, this presentation is already on SlideShare, so that bit.ly address down at the bottom, you can find the entire presentation, and it will be downloadable, Creative Commons. So there's a lot of slides. I'm warning you, there's a lot of slides, and they're really dense. So you're going to have to break out your Tylenol and follow along, and maybe sort of check out some of the slides after. David has said that I've been involved in recognition of prior learning e-portfolios since 2003. It's a story I often tell. It's a sad story, but my honeymoon was actually at an e-portfolio conference. Thankfully, it was in La Rochelle in France, and so there was some really nice time off, and so I'm still married, and actually we have a daughter now. So I'm going to talk to you today about what's called a VUCA world. Some of you may have heard this expression. Basically, it's a volatile world. It's uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous. By the time you think you've caught up, you're already obsolete. And there's a lot of overlapping types of things. And when you try and classify something, often it's like nailing Jell-O to a wall. So this is roughly my nailing of Jell-O to a wall this morning. I'm going to talk about, just going to frame things in terms of skills and capabilities. Just show you I did a little bit of research about Waterloo before speaking to you today. And then we're going to talk about what open badges are as micro-credentials and more. And then show you some examples, lots of examples. That's actually the source of a lot of the slides. Lots of examples of open badges in action. And then sort of start to look towards the future and start talking about open badges beyond the institution and what we would call open recognition networks. And then just wind up with a little bit of detail about cancred.ca. There's a more detailed session later in the afternoon where I'm going to be diving into more of the actual technologies. So, skills gap. Is there one? Well, technology skills are in demand. This is LinkedIn's 2017 list. You notice something about that? Well, two things, I would think. They're all technical, and they're changing. They're changing really fast. Oops. So, and that's the issue, is by the time you get one skill, it's already obsolete. For the next project, you need a new skill. So often you need the enabling skills of soft skills, the ability to keep up. And this is something that they've been exploring in the World Economic Forum. So they have a different list of skills, and those tend to be a little more soft. So their recommendations for action in terms of learning and teaching and learning is to start to break down the silos between humanities and science, between education and work, and to incentivize lifelong learning, and to collaborate across sectors, not within sectors. So this is from a white paper for talking about what associations can do outside of the academy, what associations can do to address the skills gap for people already working. So you might think of these people potentially as competitors to what you do. They're potentially more agile. They're not necessarily more agile, but they're potentially more agile. And they cite things, the rising cost of higher education. A lot of people aren't completing degrees. A lot of people are out there. There's high youth unemployment, particularly among young men. Traditional students are from yesterday. A lot of people are coming back to the academy later in life and with other things going on in their lives in this VUCA world. And so traditional educational approaches can't necessarily meet all the needs that society is making. So this is just something about soft skills and varying perceptions of whether you have the soft skill or not. The employers are the dark blue, the students are the light blue. So there's a bit of a difference between whether the perception of being able to work with others in teams versus the ability to work with others in teams, for example. Here in Canada, just to show you that the skills that people are asking for, the graphic on the left from the Business Council of Canada talks about entry-level candidates in the dark blue and mid-level candidates in the green, so that leadership skills, they don't necessarily want leadership skills for people entering the workforce, but partway through their careers, they'll start to look for those leadership skills. And the same with areas such as, just as a variation, collaboration, that's what they're looking for on the way in. The Conference Board of Canada, again, the ability to work across multiple subjects. All of these are very soft skills. There's Canada West Foundation is a think tank in Calgary. It's actually run now by Martha Hall Finley, so it's not quite, the politics you think it might be. Basically, the person who runs the Human Capital Center of Excellence is actually from Essential Skills Alberta. They've been looking at competencies and frameworks and trying to find a common language, and they think they're close to it. And it may be based on looking at elements that are in other countries. So for example, when you look at an engineering drawing, there are different levels of skills, different contexts for looking at that engineering drawing. And there should be a common language for talking about that. So people know what they're talking about. They're not having to constantly reinvent the wheel when you talk about skill sets and outcomes. So another solution that's out there right now, competency-based learning. So for the Harvard Business Review is basically saying what we need is learning pathways that are based on competencies, not courses, not seat time, competencies. And there's just a view of how that can play out on the right. Is this a good pacing for people? Okay. So in BC, again, the conference board, this is picking up on the same thing I was showing you earlier. They're saying, well, how do we make this happen for a better British Columbia? Well, expand co-op. You folks are the leaders for co-op here, and we'll go into that a little bit later. There's needing to reach out to employers better. Governments have a role to play, typically in funding and setting policy priorities. Employers need to make experiential learning more meaningful. And individuals need to actually be proactive because, well, we talk about that. Not everybody can make it into a co-op program. In Ontario, there's a trend towards micro, not so much the longer programs. And so I understand that's also happening here in Waterloo, where you're talking about sub-master's degrees, basically, certificates. The minor, okay, we'll talk about that after. All right, maybe I misinterpreted that. And the idea that skills and competencies are the focus rather than credentials necessarily. This is a study from the US, in the Western US, basically talking about program completion statistics. They were worried because a lot of people weren't completing programs. But there's another way of looking at that is that these people are adults. Maybe they got what they wanted, and then they moved on. Is there a way that you can enable that? Is there a way you can synergize with that? So another disruptor out there, everybody's heard of Coursera, everybody's heard of edX. Those come with micro-credentials. Those aren't open badges, they're micro-credentials. It's all, well, I have a slide that basically describes all that. Udacity, another one. So when Google wants to do something, the next big thing in big data, it doesn't set up a 2-year program or a 4-year program. It sets up a 4-month, 6-month, 8-month program and gets the posse it needs to move on to that next big project. It's much more agile and it's much more flexible. 70-20-10, has anybody heard of that term? So the idea with 70-20-10 is that 10% of your life, perhaps, is spent in formal instruction. 20%, and these are notional proportions, right? 20% is social, learning from others, being mentored, asking questions. 70% is just surviving. It's just trying to get that thing out the door and maybe using tools to help yourself do that. So Deakin Prime, which is the Con Ed division of Deakin University in Melbourne, Australia, has basically built their learning strategy around this. You start with a course, you get people to socialize and make sense of that course in their community, and then you give them the tools they need to work alone and get the work done and apply that knowledge that they've learned. So David's talked about this a bit. They're very much focused in Ontario right now. You are very much focused in Ontario right now on the workforce of tomorrow, the highly skilled workforce. And Campus Ontario is rethinking how learning resources are provided in terms of cost, in terms of flexibility, in terms of meaning for context, and how what's the user experience for the learner within that, and then how you recognize that learning. So this is a fellow from Northern Ireland does a lot of great illustrations. And this one basically talks about the three-dimensionality of learning. You not only need depth of knowledge, and you also need breadth of knowledge in terms of applying your knowledge and in terms of gathering new knowledge. And that's what they like to call the T-shaped student, or Tom Carey, who is connected with Waterloo, also talks about the K-shaped student, which is sort of odd, hard to visualize. But so basically, you know, how do we make this happen? So experiential learning is obviously one great solution. This HECO document on the left, I rather like. The Council of Universities, this will be familiar to many people. Certainly it's what Waterloo is known for. The stat, it looks like you have about a quarter of co-op students in Canada right now, the active co-op students. Is that roughly? So about 20,000 and there are 80,000 in all, something like that, which is a lot. So paper is dumb. Paper doesn't tell you much. Paper, there's a lot of meaning behind paper, one thinks, but it doesn't, in and of itself, you can't touch the paper. You can't link from the paper to something else. That's a problem. So that's why people are coming up with digital solutions that actually connect and talk better and link back to more information if necessary. And it's actually, if you think of a diploma as a bond, people talk about clipping coupons off their bonds, but you can't really clip a coupon off your diploma and remix it. It's a little tough. So this is one solution for graduate employability, the co-curricular record. Is anybody involved in co-curricular records at the moment? Okay. I'll have to be a little careful what I say then, because I think it's a wonderful idea. I'm sorry?
I'm also the co-chair nationally.
Okay, cut the recording right now. Okay. I think it's a wonderful idea. So far I'm being somewhat disappointed in the implementation of it, because what it comes down to, and I'm not picking on University of Toronto here, employers don't want another piece of paper. They want people to think about what those experiences has done for them and ways of encouraging that. So, and we'll talk about that, and I have some examples about how that can play out. That are happening elsewhere. So another disruption that's happening is LinkedIn. They want to build that business graph of the world, and they want you all in their big silo. So do we do that? Is that something that we want to do? Do we want to, because if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. So just something here with the health industry. This is a white paper from the US. And basically the trend in professional learning is actually continuous credentialing and moving away from paper and remixing that learning and making it more meaningful as you move on. So this is I was amazed to actually see this story on Friday in the U.S. News and World Report, basically talking about Waterloo yet again and the co-op programs and how, gosh, we might want to do more of that down here in the U.S. And This is a prompt for international students to come to Canada and get a better education, a co-op education. So I thought that was pretty cool. Again, this is not going to be new to many of you. I like the one on the right. This is basically John Tory's attempt to hitch his wagon to your star. And obviously you're looking to the future. It's you're looking for continuous improvement. There's Co-op 2.0. There's Waterloo Edge, which I guess is still in the making. And you're looking forward. I noticed that the strategic plan goes to about 2018, so you're probably thinking about the new strategic plan and what might replace that. I'm again just showing I've done my research here. These are degree level expectations that I see. Typically they seem to come from the Ontario-wide perspective here, with the exception of the two lower ones, the experiential learning and the diversity. So this is good. I noticed there's a lot of mentions of knowledge here, which is interesting. This is my attempt to talk about potential issues for Waterloo, and this is where I'm saying, help me here. Please, help me. Give me some feedback about this. So adding employers, does that include placements overseas in other countries? I'm assuming yes. And then meeting the needs of non-co-op students, that we're already talking about the edge. Placing international students, this is me picking up between the lines because I was reading a story and they were saying it's slower to place the international students, but eventually they do get placed. So to me that's some perception of soft skills. Is it just language? Is it culture? Is there something that needs to be worked on there? And again, it's difficult sometimes to lead from the front. You have to be looking around behind you all the time, so that can be a little difficult. Is there an issue coming up with virtualization of work? The reason I say this, I was hearing from somebody from IBM, and they were talking about trying to fill, it was a role, what is it now? System architect or something like information architect. It's really difficult, multifaceted role of being in charge of a big project, and they're finding real difficulties in filling that until they realized it doesn't have to be one person. It can be a few people working together in a virtual work situation that can be a composite one person. So that to me argues reslicing and virtualizing and essentially what's happening into the world in general. And then the innovator's dilemma. That is something that Clayton Christensen talked about for example, in the vacuum tube industry. When transistors came in, they were crap, weren't they? They were awful. The only good thing about them is they met an unmet need, which is if you were a teenager and wanted to listen to your music instead of mom's music, you got a little transistor radio and you listened to your music. And then they gradually ate their way into the center, and now we don't see so many vacuum tubes anymore. And the vacuum tube industry knew it was happening, and they actually tried to do something about it, but they were stuck on quality. They were stuck on it has to be quality. So that's just something that it blew my mind when I realized what he was talking about there, Clayton Christensen. And I've been thinking about it ever since. So what does the future hold for higher ed? Well, another university had to go with this, and that's Stanford. And they basically tried to think, what would Stanford look like in 2025? What would education at Stanford look like? And they came up with 4 potential scenarios, or what they call provocations. And one of them is the open loop university. So instead of being a serial student, you are a sometime recidivist student, and you loop back your way back through the university. Another one is the paced education. So you can basically spread it out a little more. Okay, that's another look they have. And all of this is actually very well presented on their website with a video, with a toolkit that I'll show you at the end. The axis flip here is the idea that start with skills rather than knowledge, and use knowledge to feed the skills. And then the other one is from majors to missions. So instead of starting with, I'm going to learn this topic, it's, I want to do this in the world. How do I get there? And what would that do to the educational experience for the student? So they encourage you to download their toolkit. There's playing cards where you can just sort of, go through that. There's a workbook you can work through, and then what they call a playbook. That seems to be the hip thing to do now in design projects. And that's something I encourage you to do. We don't really have time to get into it here. So, which brings me to, now that I've sort of hopefully blown your minds a little bit and cleared them, and we can talk now about open badges, which I think, with my ePortfolio background, I just think of them as an ePortfolio technology, and hopefully I can make that case for you today. So I want to deal with the word badge to begin with. I typically never mention the Boy Scouts in the first 5 minutes, okay? Because it's unfair, because you have to do something for those suckers. But it's seen as kid stuff, okay? But the Boy Scouts is actually a paramilitary organization. It had its origins in the siege of Mafeking in the Boer War. These were runners sending messages back and forth. And Baden-Powell was so taken by this and so taken by the learning he saw happening with those kids that he decided to come back and set up the Boy Scout movement in the UK after. So down on the right there, for example, these are RCN vocational trade badges. If you have that badge on your sleeve, it means you know welding. It doesn't mean you tried welding, okay? So, and then obviously wearing a police badge and not being a policeman, that's not a good thing. So, what is an open badge? Well, I often say it's a micro-credential because that probably takes up the majority of what people talk about, think about. But I'd like to try and get beyond that a little bit. But certainly micro-credential, let's spend most of our time with that. It's a digital representation of something that you've done, typically something that you have demonstrated you can do. It's not you spent seat time and got this, although some people do issue them for that. As an open artifact, it's transparent. You can click on it, and I'll show you an example of that. You click on it and see why you got it. What's the name? What's it about? What were the criteria for getting it? When was it issued? Will it expire? Is there evidence to back it up? What's the alignment of it? What's the meaning of it? And that's what makes it so powerful, because it can be small, it can be big, it can be nano, it can be meso, it can be mega. And it was originally invented by Mozilla, typically as a way of going around thinking about out-of-school learning. But it's interesting, in the US, in Australia, and the UK, the education system has basically jumped on it in a number of ways, not so much here in Canada, because it does all these wonderful teaching and learning things. It's got formative and summative power. I'm getting ahead of myself. This is my attempt, an adaptation of what somebody called Doug Belshaw, who used to work for Mozilla, did, basically placing open badges in badge space. So they're a form of credential. They're typically a slightly softer form of credential. They can be a micro-credential. They can be a signal of achievement. They are a digital badge, but there are digital badges that are not open badges. Digital badges that never leave the system. So for example, if you're in Khan Academy, you can earn badges and work your way up through the system, but you can't take those things out. You might be able to download the image itself, but it's not something you can take away and present somewhere else. And one thing I've added to Doug Belshaw's diagram is this thing right here is digital badges can be dog biscuits. They can be stickers for charts, and I very much emphasize that it's not a good thing for open badges, because the whole point of open badges is portability. So what's the point of taking something that was a pat on the head and showing it here? There is no point. It's not to say that there is not formative value to an open badge, but typically it's the formative value of you reflecting on what you've done and being able to take it forward. So this is basically in detail. David mentioned I'm part of MPLAN. MPLAN is a member organization of CAPLA, the Canadian Association for Prior Learning Assessment. We ran a boot camp, and we basically badged the boot camp. And what happened from that is people went around these different stations and learned about the different aspects of setting up a recognition or prior learning system. And then they reflected on it, and they had to actually provide 5 different answers of 50 to 250 words apiece. And for that reflection, they earned a badge, which is actually a meaningful recognition of learning, I would say, because they had to spend the entire day and then another couple of hours reflecting on it. One of the great values of that is the feedback that came back from that reflection. Huge value for the conference itself, and a lot better than smiley sheets. So here's an example of my bootcamp badge on my LinkedIn profile. So what I'm trying to get at here is you can earn badges in all these different venues. An issuer need not be an academic institution. Very often it is an academic institution, but I just showed you an association that issued a digital badge. It can be, if you're young and in the community, it can be for community service. It can be for continuing professional development. It can be for volunteering and demonstrating leadership capabilities in a volunteer capacity. You essentially mix it together in what's called a badge backpack, and then start presenting it on social media for purposes that could be for your own identity. It could be for being accepted into post-secondary, for example. So down in the States, for example, the common application is now, there's one stream into the common application for post-secondary where you can display badges. It's just an instance of where you show me a link of and it could be your portfolio or it could be a badge. So, and so basically, it's a way, think of it as a modular portfolio system where you can take these pieces and remix them into different clusters and fill in the gaps between them in terms of curating them and commenting on them and making a case for yourself. So making basically a rhetorical purpose for your badges. So just again to summarize here, hopefully, I've given you the technical description. It's a clickable badge. Should I show you? So this is my passport. So basically, a passport is a simple e-portfolio, and I'll show you an example of how that works. But I'll just show you a page on my passport. So this is that same badge here. In a new context. And I'm showing, and I can align it with other badges. I can also put in text with here. I can show video. So for example, if I got a badge for speaking today, and I guess I won't, I could back it up with a video. And so I did get a badge for the BC Open Badges forum last week, and I do have a video backed up as evidence in that. I'll just come back here. So I just want to basically summarize what they can be used for. Yes, they can motivate learning, but please don't start there. They have most meaning in terms, in my view, they have most meaning in terms of the summative value of them. The portable value of them is what makes them interesting. So getting students interested in badges the place to start is where will they use them? Who will look at them when they have them? Because they're going to ask you that question, okay? If an employer has said, gosh, if somebody comes to me and shows that they have demonstrated leadership capabilities and it's a believable story, believable narrative, I would look at that. And employers are saying that. But you need to start there rather than start with the teaching and learning. That's my view. Basically, it's a way of recognizing status. You can see how you're moving, so you can have pathways, you can have milestones, so it could be a linear pathway or it could be a sort of a get 7 of these, and this will mean this for you, so you can pick your own pathway somewhat. And it's also in terms of keeping artifacts. What have you done? What has been your learning journey? Look back over your learning journey, your portfolio, and that will help you talk about yourself when that employer says, tell me about yourself. So Purdue was looking at this, and they were comparing open badges to grades, and basically they saw it as putting more power into the hands of students to talk about what their skills and knowledge were. So, and it's more transparent, and basically it's a way of recognizing learning outside the classroom. Ways of recognizing learning that's typically not well recognized now. That's the sweet spot. So Penn State has been doing a lot of work with badges, and I really like this way they've laid it out. Basically, they talk about badges in courses. They talk about badges across programs. They talk about badges outside of programs, badges in MOOCs, etc. And then, after graduation, professional development and certification. That sort of remixing of what you know and can do once you have your basis. So there have been a lot of them issued. There are many issuers. I did a sort of a deep dive a few months back, and I came up with some trends that I noticed. They got it started in after-school and community programs for youth, but continuing education has jumped on it. Professionalization in PD, especially actually for educators and especially teachers in K-12. And something called the extended enterprise that I'll talk about. Soft skills are huge. So we'll just go through some of these. These are some examples of continuing education. A lot of them are actually at the sort of college level. I have an example I'll show you at the university level. But essentially, these are skills that people can use, resume-worthy skills that they can demonstrate. Colorado State has done this for their Certified Gardener program, and they have a multi-leveled system that's basically backed by their brand, but it's working in an extension. So you have treks working their way into quests and then rolling up into the idea of a mastery. There's another diagram that shows that in a different way. Technology vendors. This has been an early adopter, so IBM, I've got an example of how the great success that they've had with this. And this goes back to that whole Udacity idea. Do you know Hadoop? Because we need somebody who knows Hadoop now. Okay? Do you know it? What demonstrates that you know it? Professionalization in PD, HR organizations are getting involved in this. The health sector is starting to get very interested in this. And people in and around there. So Prince 2, for example, that's a badgeable skill. Co-Curricular, business skills development. This is something with the University of Michigan. Over on the right, you'll see the process they have for that. They do their co-curricular experiences. They reflect on their co-curricular experiences. They respond to feedback, and then they get a badge. It's not just, I did this for so many hours, and these are my hours. Give me my badge. Lipscomb University. Does anybody know what is OSCE, Objective Structured Clinical Examination for people in the health sector? Well, they have this for business skills. People actually show up, get involved in a simulation, and they get watched through a one-way mirror and basically evaluated on their leadership skills, because they're throwing stuff into these meetings and people are sent in as ringers to turn the meeting around 180 degrees, and they're just watching how people respond. And it's a really, really interesting thing. I think quite expensive, but basically they badge them, okay? And this Scottish Social Services Council I talk about a lot because they are a regulator and a sector council, and they have a number of issues. Again, they just can't keep up with the demands for learning. And what they're saying is, we can't give you a course for everything you need. You have to take charge of your own learning. We'll give you the tools to help you do that, but we won't do it all for you. So essentially, they'll organize an event, and they'll give you a badge for showing up at the event. That's okay. They'll give you another badge for, have we got that? No. They'll give you another badge for actually commenting on the event. So, and we picked up on that in a recent conference in BC where we got people to reflect on the event and they got a badge based on the reflection. An even better badge they'll give you is if you can give evidence of how you've applied this in your practice. How I've changed my practice based on what I learned from you at that event. And that's just an example of the kind of thing that they're doing. So I wanted to talk briefly about this because I could go on at great length. The whole notion of an extended enterprise of learning. So IBM, I have an example of this, but think of, say you're a company and you have a product, and say you're Toyota, and you need to basically teach your suppliers how to supply you. You need to teach your customers how to use your product. You need a feedback loop from your customers to basically keep that continuous improvement feedback loop happening. And you need a bigger footprint from outside of your organization. It's not just a question of training your employees. That's just from a private sector perspective. Basically, you can extend your influence using this notion of a value stream of learning. And private companies can use this, governments can use this, and universities can use this as well. And I don't have time to go into this right now, but basically it's a way of extending your footprint. So, for example, Open University is increasing its pipeline of incoming students by badging open courses, totally open courses, okay? And basically what they do is they convince prospective students that they can work at the university level in their open university. And so they're basically encouraging them into the system. And they're seeing a huge surge in people actually registering for courses and people actually completing programs based on this. And they're actually also noticing people are using the badges, even though they're not invigilated, people are using the badges in resumes. Because they think they're meaningful and employers are looking at them. So that's one example. IBM has seen a great upsurge in its engagement with its technologies and its gain for these resume-worthy achievements. So did you learn this technology? Are you a leader in this technology? Can we hire you for this technology? Are you a customer using this technology? And so they've seen, for example, a 129% increase in enrollments since they introduced open badges, and people actually completing the course, not only completing the course, but actually getting the certification for the course after. So basically doing the exam afterwards, because it's going to have a positive impact on their careers. So they see an impact both for the badge earners, for their clients, and for them. So the ROI for them, they're reducing employee turnover. They're 60% increase in customer trials. So they say they used to go around to the university and saying, please use this software. And the uptake was often disappointing. What they're finding is that people are actually downloading the software and using it and creating a commitment to IBM. The other thing they're talking about, and they haven't really got here yet, is they're talking about a consolidated skills registry for their company that they'd be able to address for their global workforce of about, well, a little under 500,000 people worldwide. So I want to spend a little time on Deakin University. I talk about them a lot. They have an advantage. They actually have a qualifications framework. And it's based initially on the European qualifications framework. And what I mean by that is a master's degree is a level for them. It means something. It means something in the university. It means something in the workplace. So if you're an AQF9, you're a principal senior engineer, okay? Or and typically you have a master's degree. So using that, they're able to align their strategy so that when they talk about those soft skills that we're talking about, which include communication, problem solving, critical thinking, they talk about a level that people have it at, a level in terms of complexity, in terms of ambiguity. And they have ways of presenting these. So what they have is, for example, at the undergraduate level, graduating students can compete for these hallmarks. So they say, I'm communicating at a 4-year level I have communication skills at a 4-year level. And typically they assemble an evidence package, they present it to a panel within the academy, and they get issued that or not. They get feedback perhaps and can loop back into it. So they're using these hallmarks on LinkedIn. Deakin Digital is actually going even further. It's actually disrupting the master's degree. Well, it started with the master's degree. But it's actually disrupting all degrees and basically saying, we want to, once you have graduated, say, as a bachelor, and you've been working for 10 years, you don't need to necessarily drop your work for 2 years and come back and spend tens of thousands of dollars to get your master's degree. We will recognize your professional practice at the appropriate level of the AQF and give you this little bit of course level specific knowledge course level work. And the hybrid combination of that means you can get potentially a master's degree at a fraction of the time and a fraction of the cost. And they say is in a more rigorous way because they have looked much more closely at what you know and can do. So these are the recognition of professional practice ones. You notice they're mostly soft, so it's emotional judgment, collaboration, teamwork, innovation, critical thinking, etc. And again, those levels going down the left, that's from the AQF. So entry level would be college, for example, a community college. And these are the degrees that they're enabling. So a Master of Professional Practice for Financial Planning, a Master of Professional Practice for Information Technology. So it's a combination under 20K Australian for financial planning and also under 20K for information technology. So this is disruption. And here, obviously, over in professional and continuing education, somebody doesn't need a degree. They just need to say, I can do digital marketing. I can do data-driven marketing, et cetera. Here's my credential that says so. So I'm going to shift gears a bit here, and we're going to dive more deeply into how soft skills are developed. This is the digital 21st Century Skills Badging Challenge is set up by the Education Design Lab, and they're based in the Washington area. But this network they've built up actually goes nationwide and involves universities and involves employers. And what they've done is said, what are meaningful ways that we can engage students in extracurricular activity while they're in the academy that will help them make the transition to the workplace? And show what they know and can do and help them integrate what they've learned in a meaningful way. So they've come up with a method of doing that. Well, basically they brought employers, they brought educators and other stakeholders into various rooms. They applied a lot of design challenges to that, and then they started working directly with the institutions. So I'm going to show you the Georgetown one. I'll just play a video from the Georgetown one because it illustrates it quite well.
Because I consider myself a pretty self-aware person, but I do have huge blind spots, and I think all of us do, and the DISC assessment very thoroughly called all of that out.
They're going through 6 sessions where they're communicating with a team of professionals and with each other. They're meeting with mentors. They're engaged in self-initiated learning and self-assessments. So we think that these students will actually be at a competitive advantage in telling their stories to employers.
So I think that the DISC really emphasizes your communication language, how you get along with others, how you interact, and then, very positively put room for improvement. And that's always really good, and I really appreciated it for that in and of itself. And I think that in conjunction with the Checkstar feedback, which I asked a very large variety of people to do for me, and they all were very nice and did it. And my mentor's feedback, it was really, really beneficial.
I think the key to the role of the assessments is to have some balance between formal self-knowledge, formal self-evaluation, formal, semi-formal, external evaluation, and then again an iterative process of meaning making that revisits self-insight and feedback from others.
During our time with the program, we had to complete a Checkstar evaluation in which we evaluated ourselves, and we had other people that we trust and with whom we interact on a regular basis also evaluate us. And I felt that that was the most useful part of our activities, our structured activities, because I was finally able to figure out what it is that other people see the most in me. And I was able to extract a few common themes from those reflections, things about my work ethic, things about my personality that I took for granted or that I didn't notice about myself.
It helps all of us think about what is meaningful and valuable in a modern collegiate experience, and particularly a liberal arts-centered collegiate experience, where it's not so much about pre-professional training, but more so about how do you become an agent of your own passions? How do you become an effective collaborator? How do you become somebody who communicates effectively in the right ways and with the right constituent groups?
That was exciting, wasn't it? I just wanted to summarize what they're talking about here. There's a process to what they've done. Basically, it's a 6-week program, and there's some self-evaluation, there's some 360 evaluation, there's some learning activities, and then there's some reflection, and then there's a presentation at the end. And basically, this enables them to see themselves as others see them and have a chance to meet some deficits that they might see or ways of polishing some things that are already positive about them, and it actually gives them that running start out. One thing I want to emphasize here, they talk about liberal arts, but I think anybody who is basically educates engineers or any other professionals, that notion of the reflective practitioner, you want somebody who can do more than the equations. You want somebody who knows why they're doing what they're doing and can deal with some of the ethical issues that they might have to deal with. So another one here, again, because this is a research-based organization, there are ways of recognizing the different roles that people play in research papers. The person who gets the money, the person who does the initial investigation, the person who does that really hard first draft. Those people, those enablers, those connectors that actually make research papers happen. And Mozilla Science and these partners are looking at ways of recognizing that role, because the authors, basically get all the credit, don't they? So what's happening in Canada? There are a few things happening in Canada. I would have to say we're pretty much behind when it comes to open badges in general. Australia is doing interesting things. The UK is doing interesting things, and a number of pockets of interest in the US. Basically, the federal government's playing around with it within a particular department. I'll talk a little bit about the Business Technology Management Program from ITAC. UBC's been playing with it behind the perimeter. There's a college that tried it for business skills, St. Lawrence College. Chang School is using it for Con Ed, and eCampus Ontario is getting involved, and a number of areas in the community at large. So the Chang School have been starting to badge things like Con Ed lectures, and those are easy to badge. Taking an online course, those are easy to badge. something that's harder to badge, which I think is more significant. It's a little disappointing that only 2 have been issued. There's this subject matter expert coaching system that they've set up, where a person who wants to be able to do something can engage with a subject matter expert, be paired with that person, be mentored to do something which might be, I don't know, write a white paper or write a business plan or something like that. And that one hasn't typically been badged. But it's great that they're dipping their toe in the water like this and just trying things out, and this in a very low-risk kind of way. ITAC, Industry Technology Association of Canada, they actually accredit your one of your programs, the Business Technology Management Program. I don't know the exact name, but they're actually going one step further now, and so they're saying when your students graduate, they can become a BTM associate, and then a professional, and then a BTM certified executive. And this is all aligned to an external framework that they have based on skills framework for the information age, which is, anybody hear of SOPHIA? Skills framework for information age? Okay, it's a actually fairly well-known international framework developed in the UK and is used in a number of different countries and has multiple levels in multiple dimensions. And it's something that ends up being used. It's technical skills, yes, but also soft skills. It's really worth a look. We're trying to develop a regional skills network in BC. We developed the BC Open Badges Forum, and I would have to say, even though I helped organize it, it was actually fairly successful. We had a number of people from different sectors. It was largely post-secondary, but we'd have people from government, from K-12, from associations, and basically talking cross-sectorally about what is meaningful, what learning and knowledge for me versus for you. You know, what does an employer really look for? And we got started on that, and we have big hopes on where that can go. I want to talk a little bit about open badges and e-portfolios, because you folks get involved in a lot of portfolio learning. This is a picture of my badges in my e-portfolio on the left. Over on the right, I showed you already that page of my open badge passport. So you can think of them as I say, a way of a passport. Can be just a container for badges that you can provide more meaning around the badge, or it can be a challenge for a badge. It can be an evidence package for a badge. So it can be this recursive process. This is an example of an e-portfolio called Deakin Sync out of Deakin University. I keep on going back to them. But so graduating students that would have a page like this where they have the badges that they've earned, communications, whatever. They have a little stand-up interview of themselves. It's called Me in a Minute. It's a very slick little thing that they do. And then all the other evidence, just building it up for their public profile. So that they're presenting themselves here, they're presenting themselves over on LinkedIn, and just cross-referencing. Notre Dame is getting involved in open badges, and they're really getting involved in coming up with meaningful ways of demonstrating the learning that's happened from those co-curricular experiences that are involved. Tracy Penny Light, former Waterlooian, was presenting in BC about open badges and e-portfolios. She's working on something called the Ripple project, which is a SSHRC-based project. Oh, sorry, SSHRC, I should say, SSHRC rather than SSHRC. And basically talking about they're actually diving deeper into than I am, just talking about the epistemologies of this. What does it mean in terms of what you know and can do, and what are the ways in which you can follow this. And again, that link down there, you can see a video of her presenting it and the slides, and I just copied 4 of her slides to show you here and maybe interest you in finding out more. So I come back to this notion of the co-curricular record. To me, a co-curricular record looks at this much of your experience because it's typically only on-campus activity. It ideally would be this much of your experience presented in meaningful ways and remixed and curated as badges, perhaps, as other content in something that like an e-portfolio. I blog about this as well, and I found this picture that sort of helped me present what I'm talking about. You can think of the badge as the rocks, and you can think of the portfolio as the embankment. Okay, so they support each other, and it's a whole structure. And you can have the glue, and you can have the structure, and well, anyway. Those things are called gabions, by the way. I had to look that up. Just want to talk about other examples of emerging open recognition networks. This is one in Ireland. I really am interested in diving more deeply into this because what they're talking about is digital skills in Irish higher education. What does it mean for educators? What does it mean for students? What are some better ways of using educational technology to teach? And what are some ways of demonstrating your learning with educational technology and collaborating? So there's a lot of really interesting stuff in there. And they're started by the National University of Ireland, but other universities are climbing on board. And there's some talk of an Irish passport where people can share the learning that has been demonstrated by the students and can start remixing that learning. In Scotland, on the right there is a picture. I really like this picture on the right because it's people actually trying to map who are the players out there and what are the connections between the players. And are there ways that we can make a connection to this player who can then make a connection to that player and help us build a bigger network. Over on the left is this rather aspirational project of the idea of badging the world. I'm not sure how far they've made it yet. You'll notice there's not too much happening up in Canada. Opening educational practices in Scotland. Opening educational practices is kind of like a buzzword now. The idea is it's not quite open yet, but we're opening it up. Basically what this is setting up partnerships with external partners of the academy and trying to build these recursive loops of knowledge and skills, because there's knowledge that's developed outside the academy also. Academies are wonderful for developing knowledge, but there is knowledge that happens outside, and there's feedback that can happen about the knowledge that can come back in. And what they're talking about here with Open University in Scotland is some of the partnerships they've set up to explore this. One of them is in the renewable energy sector for communities around renewable energy, sort of like what they call a third sector project, and a lot of other good work happening with the health sector in Scotland. So, so they talk about, you know, what's the knowledge, what are the assets that you have in your workplace? Can we help you curate these assets and develop them into basically learning resources? And what are ways in which you know that people have learned? Can we help you with the assessment strategies? And can we get some of this knowledge coming back into the academy so we can improve what we're doing? And they talk about the evolution of it. They have this sort of devolution kind of idea where they want to be able to push learning outside the academy as well as having it inside. This is a really complex slide, but it actually led to a project for me. And I presented this in Barcelona in 2015, basically talking about Doctors Without Borders. I'm wearing another hat. I do some work with Doctors Without Borders. I've been jumping up and down and waving my arms about e-portfolios and open badges forever. They were intrigued because this folded into something they were talking about, which is personal learning environments, personal development environments, because they know that, you know, they're struggling even to provide the 10% of learning. People are having to learn on the go, whether it's in South Sudan or wherever, you know, Bangladesh. And so essentially what I said here was, what if everybody could collaborate on the learning, provide different learning experiences, provide portable digital credentials of that learning, and what if those people could curate those credentials in a portfolio and make them available for career purposes, for being recruited for a new mission, for a new role within the organization. You might have come in as a doctor, you could end up being a mission leader. You might have come in as a security person and end up being somebody in logistics. For potentially for academic recognition, there are conversations going on with the University of Geneva right now, and could be with Deakin, and then possibly with new careers. Eventually you burn out, you need to move on. How can we help you get into a new career? So based on that, there's a project getting underway called the Humanitarian Passport, and this is being led by the Humanitarian Leadership Academy here. They've set up this passport. It's the same technology that I'll talk about with regard to CanCred, but this is over in Europe. And they're working with other agencies to collaborate on learning opportunities, and then collaborate on this TEMBO is this innovation project that's being funded by MSF internally, and we're going to be developing a badging system for them so that if you go to Haiti say to deal with the hurricane survivors, you might get a badge for that, and that might be an experience, like a service badge. And that would actually be meaningful in and of itself. But you might also get a logistics badge so that the person looking at that would know, okay, you can go in at this level on this mission because I know you can do this. It's not like you have to interview everybody all the time. So, next steps. How am I doing here? Oh, it's not too bad. So, Mozilla Open Badges kind of got started by hippies. And that was a good thing, actually, because they were thinking out of the box. But they've grown up now. The Open Badges have grown up, and they've been taken over by an organization called IMS Global. And these are the people who bring you Caliper, which is a big data learning analytics tool, and also LTI, Learning Tools Interoperability. They're the ones responsible for that standard. So basically, they're bringing the standard into the somewhat academic fold in higher education, and they're saying, how will this add meaning to what we're doing already in terms of extended transcripts, et cetera? And I've got a little more detail about that later. The actual backpack, which was this reference platform for maintaining badges, has been taken over by a UK organization. That's an alternative place to hold your badges. This is IMS Global, some of the projects it's working on. So the extended transcript is their notion of you have your academic transcript, and then you could have a transcript that would, say, bring the best of co-curricular transcript or co-curricular record, plus other elements, and a way of packaging that in meaningful ways. And open badges are being folded into this evolving standard that they're developing. They've developed a couple of extensions to the standard. It's a very flexible standard, the Open Badges standard. So they have issuer accreditation that they've already developed, and then also what kind of assessment and a way of classifying the type of assessment that led to the badge. So it's a more structured way of describing the badge. It makes it more machine readable, and actually was developed before the current version of the standard, version 2.0. So version 2.0 will have third-party endorsement. So there's a bit of overlap there, but again, that'll just all be smoothed out over the coming months. And then the idea is to have a comprehensive learning record. So just a little more detail about the open. This is probably a little nerdy. Maybe I could save this for the afternoon. But basically, this is to say to make it more robust, more machine readable, and there's a really interesting one there, which is internationalization and the idea of having a multilingual badge. So here in Ontario, that can be interesting. You issue a badge, and you just click on English or French within the badge instead of having to issue separate badges. It's all connected, and there's a lot of work going on in the US right now about this. Connecting credentials is my sort of high-level view of this, is trying to do something like a European qualifications framework for credentials in North America, the idea of that leveled approach, or similar to the Australian qualifications framework. The Credential Transparency Initiative is something, these are both funded by Lumina, by the way, is evolving into the credential engine. And the idea here is, how do we make sense of these credentials? What are they? And is there a common language for talking about them? And open badges are folding into that. W3C, there's work underway to make open badges connect with the idea of just, this is me, I have this badge, and making that more robust and more widely available So it should make badges even easier to read, more machine readable. And the Common Education Data Standards, that's a government organization down in the States, again, just talking about education data and learning transcripts, etc. Again, it's open badges are informing that. Just to getting close to winding things up here, a lot of this for me is about open recognition and different ways of recognition. It's not just what you learn in the classroom. Often it's more meaningful what you learn when you try to apply what you've learned in the classroom. So we have a declaration that we launched in Bologna, the site of Europe's first university, and the site of the original Bologna recognition, talking about ways of recognizing formal learning. We figured there should be ways of recognizing informal learning in appropriate ways that are fit for purpose. And we encourage you to go to openrecognition.org and have a look at that. If you agree with it, please sign it. And if you sign it, please claim the badge and show us that you support it. And we're also developing something called an Open Recognition Alliance, but I won't spend a lot of time on this. Just wind things up. Hopefully in a summary way, I've made a case for open badges that they can make learning more visible, potentially more meaningful, potentially more transparent, maybe a little fun even. And they can make learning more flexible. Some of you may be thinking maybe we should try this. There are some questions you should ask yourself about it. What are your goals for doing this? And I was actually showing Catherine a workbook we have where we can go into a little more detail about that. But why are you doing this? Is this something just to engage learners, or is this something that's going to be useful to them and help them make a transition? Are you able to sustain it? What's your method for doing it? Do you have support from your organization? Do you need full support across the organization, or can you work at a departmental or a faculty level and align yourselves as time goes on? What are the best ways of doing that? What are the technology choices you can make? Certainly David has an example where you can play around with our technology, but you may make other technology choices that may make some more sense to you over time. So that brings me to this, which is David has already alluded to. Basically, we're setting up essentially a 16-month experiment to talk about how these alternative forms of recognition could be used in meaningful ways in higher education in Ontario. So they are going to be putting out requests for expressions of interest to essentially do what you see here. Now, it says recognition of prior learning. What I might do there is just put that in brackets. Recognition of learning, recognition of co-curricular learning, and then those soft skills and knowledge required for getting into the workforce. Again, very much linked to the Highly Skilled Workforce Initiative, which is a really interesting document to read, and hopefully can involve some of these things that you see here. Obviously, you have a head start on the last one. That'll be happening pretty quickly. I think basically possibly wound up by second or third week of March. So this is my penultimate thought. Please think beyond the doggy biscuit and think beyond the sticker charts. And I always love ending on this one. And that's it. Thank you very much. I think we have about 15 minutes for questions. 10 minutes. 10, okay. Yes, Mark.
How is the granularity of a micro-credential determined?
That is one of the issues that still needs to be dealt with. It's basically, that's something I've been talking about for over a year. I call it weight. And typically what people do right now is they talk about the credit hour. You know, it's basically Carnegie unit. And I think it could be better than that, but I think that's where it's at. Right now, it's not even an extension, actually, and it's something that needs to come into the standards soon. There was another, yes?
Every once in a while, you use a couple of words, badgeable skill. Can you give us an example of a not badgeable skill? Or is it just, maybe there's nothing there, but it's just every once in a while.
I think what I was trying to say with that is it's something that's demonstrable. So it's something, it's a capability you have. Yeah. Yes?
That's a very interesting talk. So
Thank you.
I'm going to try to be brief because my question could go into 50 different other questions. But you've used the term resume worthy several times.
Okay.
And so if you compare a Bachelor of Arts degree from Waterloo or UAT with some other unnamed university somewhere else, one can argue that for people in the know, they could see differences in the quality of a Bachelor of Arts degree. But in a general sense, you can tell me what a Bachelor of Arts degree is and you'll be roughly correct, because they basically have to do more or less the same thing, but there'll be differences in quality. But they're all validated somehow by the issuing institution, assuming that it's an accredited institution. So with, you mentioned 10 million badges and thousands of issuers. How is there any way to validate quality? Because it sounds like it's, if it's coming from Stanford or Deakin or some other reputable place, their reputation stands behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have other, perhaps, academic institutions without that stature or non-academic issuers, because you said that was certainly a possibility, how do we know it's not just a mom and pop shop who thinks that, geez, you're good at baking bread and therefore you get a bread baking badge?
Mm-hmm. Remember I said it was invented by hippies. Okay. So that's part of it, and they wanted to make it open. They wanted to make it inclusive and accessible. Okay. So that said, there's the transparency of the badge itself. So when you click on the badge, you see who issued it, what were the criteria, and hopefully the criteria talk about the assessment. Is there evidence behind it? So basically, you drill in and you drill down on the badge, and then you decide for yourself whether it's worthwhile or not. And then when you see it the next time, you think, oh, this issuer had a good badge last time. Let me check again. Oh, this one's still good. And then eventually you say, okay, well, that's a good issuer. Okay? So that's, to date, that's been one way of doing it. Now that is not scalable, right? It's not machine readable. So what's coming into the standard is, we already mentioned the Open Badges, OBEE, that we were, where was that? The IMS global thing. So basically the issuer accreditation, so they already have an extension for that. So it's possible to say, okay, this person is accredited by this organization. That's actually folded now into the standard, the 2.0 standard, so that not only issuers will be accredited, but the so-called badge class can be endorsed, third-party endorsed. So in other words, this badge created, this badge typically issued, as issued, is good. And then also what's called the assertion. This badge earned by this person has been endorsed, again by a third party. So so basically the quality mechanisms are coming in. So hopefully there'll still be room for the hippies, but there will be room, there is now room for more formal applications of this. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay. Sorry.
Who pays for it? How does it make money? What's the, like,
Oh.
do students have to buy? Do you spend $5,000 for a badge?
Well, actually, the Deakin example, you spend.
Who's paying the people to spend the time to make all this stuff?
Well, basically, it's what is your business model? So is it included in what you provide students? I'll give you Deakin as an example, okay? So Deakin, the Hallmark badges, that is a cost of the bachelor degree. They're providing that with the bachelor degree for graduating students. For the Deakin digital badges, those recognition of professional practice badges, those are 500 Australian apiece. And you don't necessarily get the badge, right? You sign on to the badge and you buy the assessment and the counseling that leads up to it for 500 Australian. So that's one example. There are subscription models. So there's PD Learning Network. You sign on for $5, $10 a month, and you can try it for all the badges. And basically, again, you're typically paying for the assessment. The actual issuing of the badge, that's not much cost. But if you want it assessed by a human, that's costly, and then somebody has to pay some way.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was I'm just thinking thousands of hours of work, right?
Yeah, but it can be distributed, right? Actually, the Finns, that I was just looking at some stats. They had some teacher education ones. They've issued 10,000 of them, and they were freaking, okay, because all of those were looked at by one person. So they had to set up this badged panel network for issuing badges. So they now have a way where you can submit your badge, and people are in a queue, and if it's a panel of 3, the first 3 votes that come in yay or nay mean whether you get the badge or not. And people can choose to evaluate the badge or not. And that sort of calmed people down a lot. Great. Yes?
I'm curious if you could comment on stakeholder representation within the Pan-Canadian competency framework that you're mentioning. If you know, they're members of industry, higher ed institutions as well as government, or is it?
Well, actually, I think they would love it because that's what they're trying to get going. So basically, that was a thought piece to say, we need to do something here. We've talked to these people so far, but right now it's not a movement. Okay, right. Yes? Oh, yeah, sorry. And then you, okay.
I'm just wondering, Don, if you know, maybe not so much in Canada, as you say, we're sort of behind the times, but in the UK and in Australia, where this really has some momentum, is there any evidence that employers value the badges? Like, do they put a lot of value on seeing that on someone's resume?
Yeah, it's that's one thing I could have included more in this. There were some really interesting. They've been doing this a while, and again, I come back to Deakin, but they did a number of videos where they engaged employers talking about the meaning of it, and really what it comes down to is the employers need to start with the employers. And so in other words, work backwards. It's like a logic model where you think, what will be useful to the student when they leave? Who will look at it? The employers. So let's start with them to say, what do you need to see in students? What would demonstrate that they have what you need? And then work your way back from there. So the people who have done that, and Deakin has, and they had some employers who were talking about why they were useful to them. But so that's one thing you can do in a region, and if you have a good network of employers, as you do, right, you can start talking to your network either on a faculty basis or on an institutional basis to say, we're going to work on our graduate attributes, our soft skills, and what would be good for this, and would you endorse it? And that relates to the Pan-Canadian competency framework, right? So in other words, is there a common language? Or are you just coming up with a new set of buzzwords, keywords, that somebody has to figure out, what does that mean within our context here? So dialogue and common alignments. Does that help? They do like them. If they're meaningful for them and they help them filter people and either be able to choose the right person or dig deeper into that person to figure out this person or this person, they do find them very meaningful. Sorry.
So my question is, how low can you go within an institution to experiment or to start? So if the program wanted to try this out, do they need the institutions back in? Like, how does, ultimately, at some level, some instructor or some associate chair or some dean has to make a decision that, yes, we are at least going to try it out.
Right.
On some sort of experimental or pilot level. And so I want to know, where does it fit into this? Because you've been talking about institutional level.
that relates to your culture, basically. And I think it's a long conversation. Okay. Basically, I think you need both. I think you need some bottom up. I think you need some top down. I think you need some middle out. But the point is not to wait for it all to happen. Do find some low risk ways of immersing yourself in the technology. In some cases, just get involved yourself. Before you start badging students, get yourself badged and see how it feels. You know, so in other words, one great place to start is professional development, because badging the badgers will make those subsequent badges a lot more meaningful. Okay. Sorry.
Well, this has been a most interesting, most provocative presentation. Something that leaves me more than a little mildly uncomfortable is actually a good thing, because it forces you to think a bit differently than how you thought about how you did your work and the things that you believe to be kind of establishment, and now we're challenging that in a very significant way. So it's been really a great experience to hear what you've had to say. I'd like to thank the audience for attending and asking being here and supporting the week and asking your insightful questions. And won't you join me in thanking Don Presant for a most badge-worthy presentation?
Thank you. Thank you.